You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview authors of mystery, thrillers, and suspense books. I'm your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 68. Before we get things rolling, I have a special request. I've submitted Meet the Thriller Author to the 13th Annual Podcast Awards, and voting is now open for listeners until July 31st of 2018. So I would really appreciate if you could head on over to podcastawards.com and click on the Listener Nominations Now Open link to vote for this podcast in the arts and or the People's Choice categories. Winning one of those awards would be a great way for me to promote this podcast, so I would appreciate your help in helping me make that a reality. You do have to register over at podcastawards.com, and they do that in order to prevent cheating by having bots and fake accounts and whatnot from voting multiple times for a show. And so I actually like that since it keeps things relatively clean. But the process is pretty straightforward, and it shouldn't take you more than a couple minutes to complete. So anyway, I would really appreciate your support over at podcastawards.com. Okay, let's move on to the good stuff. In this episode of the podcast, you'll be meeting best-selling author Joseph Reid, whose debut novel Takeoff was published on July 1st and is already at the top of the best-selling charts on Amazon and a number one Amazon Hot new release. Takeoff is the first in Joe's exciting new series featuring Air Marshal-turned-investigator Seth Walker. Joseph has an amazing background. Growing up as the son of a Navy helicopter pilot, he moved often during his childhood, and later on he became a marine biologist before going to law school and becoming a patent litigator, and now he's writing high-octane thrillers. So here's my interview with Joseph Reid. Hi everybody, this is Alan with Meet the Thriller Author, and on Skype I have Joseph Reid. How are you doing, Joe?
I'm great. Thanks, Alan. Appreciate the chance to join you.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Could you tell the readers a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My day job is I'm a patent lawyer in San Diego. But before that, I was a biologist by training. I used to be a marine biologist, and I sort of chased great white sharks around. That was my science job before I became a lawyer. And then my first book, Takeoff, just came out. It just released on July 1, and that's how you and I found each other.
Your book has just been amazing. It's at the top of the charts on Amazon and just doing so well. So congratulations on the success.
Oh, thank you very much. It's one of those things you never know what's going to happen when you release a book, and it's been a great surprise and a great pleasure. So thank you very much.
So can you tell us a little bit about this is the start of a series, correct?
It is. It's book one in the series, and actually, I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying book two is just about done, so it'll be going into the publisher here in the next week or two.
And so how did you come up with the idea? It's a very intriguing idea with the air marshals and the whole airline background. Can you tell us a little bit about how this all came to be?
Sure. So for my job, I travel a lot. I'm probably on airplanes multiple times each month. I just got back from a 10-day trip to China, for example, last week. So I spend an inordinate amount of my time on airplanes and in airports. And so as I was sitting around, trying to think up the idea for my next book, because Takeoff wasn't the first book I wrote, I started thinking about airports and aviation as a setting for crime fiction, because in today's day and age, so much happens through airports. It's really a central hub for a lot of commerce. You've got smuggling, you've got drugs, you've got terrorism. There's all kinds of interesting things that happens at airports. And so as I continued to flush that idea out, the idea of sort of an airline-based cop came about. And I'd noticed air marshals on my flights here and there. And I researched the program a little bit. And so slowly that kind of all fell into place.
You're waiting around in airplanes and delays and all that good stuff that we do when we travel spawned a great writing project idea.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It was sitting in terminals, for weather delays and mechanicals and stuff like that. Absolutely.
So can you tell us a little bit about your character and your debut novel, Takeoff?
Sure. So the protagonist, as you said, his name is Seth Walker. He is an air marshal based in Los Angeles. And actually, he's got a sort of a tweak on the air marshal assignment. He's not just sort of safeguarding flights anymore. because of some backstory that I won't spoil that you learn about inside the book. He's been assigned to this new role where he's essentially an airborne investigator. He gets assigned to different projects that come about that center around aviation. So his assignment here is to bodyguard a young female singer. She's a teenager and she has a big song on the pop charts. And her life's been threatened. And so the FBI needs to get her from New York's JFK to LAX. And so his assignment initially is simple enough. He's just got to bodyguard her on a cross-country flight, which is something, he's done hundreds, if not thousands of times. But in the opening chapter, when they arrive at LAX, they're ambushed by a bunch of mysterious gunmen. That sets them on the run, and Seth's now obligated to not only keep the girl safe, keep himself safe, but also figure out why these mysterious gunmen are targeting her, and see if he can figure out what's going on.
When did you when you started to write this the novel? Did you already have it all outlined in your head, or do you just start to write it, or what's your process?
Yeah, I'm sort of halfway between a pantser and a plotter, I think. I sort of start out with a nugget of sort of what the book is about. Air Marshal guards, a singer on a flight, and they have to run from gunmen. And then that leads me to sort of a starting point and an ending point and a few beats in between that I know I want to hit. And then, I really do sort of just start writing, and I sort of write in between those points, from point A to point B. And, sometimes, some magic happens in there. Sometimes it doesn't. And you see what happens. And then usually I find that I get about halfway or 3/4 of the way. And by then, some dramatic shift has happened. I've realized something I didn't realize before, or I've taken a tangent that I need to account for, or something. And at that point, I usually stop short of the end, and I go back to the beginning with sort of a fresh eye on how the story works. And I start from the beginning, and I start editing, and I edit the first 3/4, and then I finish it, and I blaze through to the end. And that is what usually gets me sort of my first operational draft, if you will.
A different approach that I hadn't heard before. That's I like it though. I see where you're going with it. What you're thinking about when you're doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's trying to keep myself on track a little bit, but also allow for some of the creative moments that just sort of happen in the middle when you're wondering, okay, what would happen next, and you sort of let the ideas flow. The problem is you create some issues for yourself as you do that, so you have to sort of keep track. I keep a list as I'm going through of sort of stuff that's changed and the implications of that, so that when I go back through and I blaze through the whole thing once from start to finish, I try and clean up all those issues that I've made for myself where, some character's background has changed, or, they need to be in a different place at a different time or something like that, in order for the later stuff to make sense.
And what do you use to write your novels? Do you use a Word or a software like Scrivener? Or?
I use Word. That's kind of what I use in my day job too. So I'm sort of used to using that. And then to organize, I use a product called OneNote, which is in the Office suite. Again, I came to that from my day job. We sort of keep track of our cases in OneNote, and that's where we organize all the materials and evidence and witnesses and things like that. And so it's meant to be an outlining tool, and so I can use that pretty effectively. I've looked at Scrivener. I think OneNote and Scrivener are similar. It doesn't interface over to Word the same way, but it does allow me to do many of the same things in terms of gathering things in one place, moving things around, and stuff like that.
And so you'd mentioned that you'd written a book before. Did that one get published?
No. Takeoff is my first publication. The other novels I've written, like a lot of your guests, they're sitting in drawers, and we'll see if they ever see the light of day or something. But yeah, this is the first one to ever really get anywhere.
So have you? How long have you been writing for? Not like for work, but for like this like fiction.
Yeah. I had the first idea for my first book when I went on a trip with my wife right before my older daughter was born, and she's 13 now. So I've been thinking about this stuff for over 10 years. I'd say I've been actually writing for about 10, and then Takeoff. I started Takeoff a couple of years ago. It took me probably about a year from start to finish, and then I turned it in about a year ago so that it could go through all the different publication edits and all that kind of stuff before it released.
Mm-hmm. So you wrote it first and then got it went through a publisher, or did you already have a deal in place when you?
No, I wrote it first. And I had to, I had to find my agent, using my manuscript and all that stuff. I'm a veteran of the slush pile.
Yeah, all that fun stuff, huh?
Oh yeah.
And so, were you as a reader? Were you a fan of thrillers and mystery and suspense novels? Is that why you decided to write a thriller, or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I grew up. My favorite books growing up were, mysteries and thrillers and things like that. And then I sort of stuck with those. By the time I started writing, by then it was sort of the John Sanfords and Lee Childs and Michael Connelly's of the world. But I was a big Tom Clancy fan. I was a big Michael Crichton fan. As a scientist, like the Clancy and Crichton sort of techno thrillers appealed to me a lot because I could learn some science-y stuff in addition to having a great page turning experience. So yeah, all of that.
John Sanford, he's one of my favorites. They mentioned that one.
I will say, I have to say, and I'm here in New York for Thriller Fest, and he's supposed to be there. So Ooh. I've never met him. So if I get to meet him, I will have to tell him this.
Yeah.
Rules of Prey, his first Prey book, just changed my life. I mean, that book was just fantastic.
So you were sitting in an airport. How do you get the ideas? How do you put it all together then? When are you always thinking, and do you take notes when you have an idea for a story, or?
Yeah. I probably dictate as much as I write down ideas, and that's sort of just as they hit me. That's the beauty of having your phone these days. I'm out walking the dog. And I have a thought of, how's this going to work? And I just make a few verbal notes. And then, I sort of keep all that material together. And then, my writing time tends to be really early in the morning. So that's kind of when I, go over that stuff and then figure out, where I'm going to go with it.
And do you try to do you set goals to write every day or write a certain amount of words every day, or?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that. When I started, I read all the things about, do 1,000 words a day or do 2,000 words a day. And I really tried to keep to that. Now, juggling, sort of marketing the first book and writing the second book and everything else that's going on, I'm not as slavish to the numbers. But I do try and write every day when I'm writing, to try and keep the rhythm up. And then, I'm pretty religious about boxing off a part of my day to do it sort of undisturbed so that I make sure I get it done. I know a lot of people who sort of jog or exercise for therapy. Like writing is sort of my therapy time. If I don't do it every day, I'm just grumpy. So.
Yeah, well, that's a good habit to develop as a writer.
Yeah, it has certainly helped. I mean, you're getting something done every day, no matter how much or how little. Sort of keeps things moving.
So, do you put any of your of yourself or any of your family and friends into your books, into your characters?
That is. So, I'm a lawyer, and that is probably the number one question I get from all of my coworkers and colleagues is, "Am I in the book? Which character am I? I bet I'm this character." For some reason, lawyers always want to see themselves in print. But no, I mean, of course, your characters are, amalgams of people you know. No one is that slavishly, tied to real life. Walker, my protagonist, has things about him that are like me. I was a Navy brat growing up, and so I experienced that kind of moving all the time as a kid. And so I gave Walker that same background. I've changed careers, and Walker has changed careers a little bit. But at the same time, I've tried to give him things that are not me, to make him more interesting, both to me to write him and also to everybody else. For example, I work with a lot of engineers, particularly electrical engineers in patent law. And they just really see the world very differently than I do as, from my biology training. I mean, we will walk into some place and they will see engineering aspects of it that just never occur to me until they articulate them to me. And so making Walker have sort of an electronics technical background like I have sort of gives him a different mindset than I necessarily bring to stuff, and I find that really fun. I find it fun to write about somebody who thinks about things in a different way than I do.
Yeah, as my father-in-law is an engineer, an electrical engineer, and yeah, it's kind of like the Matrix. You see like the ones and zeros.
Exactly.
As they're walking around, yeah. So now, when you're when you're writing and you're getting into the habit, do you have like a specific spot that you like to write on, or do you like try different things like a coffee shop, or is it always like the same pattern?
I have an office, and a lot of times I write in my office. I travel enough that I've had to sort of get used to writing in different places. I can write in hotel rooms. I can write in coffee shops. I can write on airplanes. I can write in airports. Some of it is just blocking out, the world around you and really focusing. A lot of it for me is time of day too. Like I really tend to do my writing from scratch early in the morning. That's sort of when I'm most creative. I can edit almost any time. Late at night, middle of the afternoon, whatever. But in terms of real writing from scratch, I kind of find I'm only usually successful at that early in the morning.
And how was your whole experience now, being your first time getting published and working with Thomas and Mercer? I always hear a good thing about the Amazon publishing houses. How's that whole experience been for you?
Oh, it's been fantastic. I mean, it really has. It's been a dream come true. They've treated me very well, and it's a bit of a roller coaster because the first time you go through it, you don't exactly know what's coming next. Mm-hmm. But it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of collaboration. Everything from the editing process to the cover to marketing. I've tried to treat it as a learning experience because these folks know so much more about their aspects of the publishing process than I do. But it's been a great learning experience, and it's just been a great experience overall.
Yeah, your cover is very slick. The ominous plane taking off, that background, very nice.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I love it. I get a lot of compliments on the cover. The cover's great.
Yeah, and so you said you're finished with number 2, or you're working on that one right now, the second book?
I personally am just about done with number 2. Oh. I have to turn it in, and then it'll go into the machine, as it will, as it were. But yeah, my part of getting the first real manuscript version of the second book is just about done.
Yeah. Oh, I just noticed I was looking at your page. It's already out for pre-order with Amazon.
Yeah, the title is False Horizon. Oh. That's an optical illusion that pilots suffer from sometimes. And yeah, it's I believe they put a publication date up there of June next year. But yeah, the schedule's already set, and that's why I have to get the manuscript in and get rolling on it.
Is that difficult with the deadlines, or do you find that helps you?
Oh yeah, it was my first time working with a deadline, and I'd heard that sort of changed things, and it did probably. I mean, it certainly added some urgency to it. But it's been good. I had a decent amount of lead time, and I knew the idea I wanted to pursue sort of going in. So it's been a relatively smooth process so far, knock on wood.
And have you been hearing a lot from readers through the social media or anything like that?
Yeah, that's been great. I'm on social media, and it seems like, for whatever reason, my readers tend to favor either emailing me through my website or finding me on Facebook. But yeah, it's that's been a lot of fun. I've had a couple of book signings, so I've gotten to see some readers face to face. But then others have just been ringing in, and it's been a lot of fun to see that reaction to it.
Yeah, now you mentioned that you were at Thriller Fest. Is that your first one?
My first Thriller Fest, yes, and my first sort of book convention. I've lived in San Diego now for a long time, and so I'm a comic book reader from way back. And so when I first moved to San Diego, they have the annual Comic-Con convention there, and I'd read about that as a kid and decided and talked my wife into letting me go. When we first moved to San Diego, because I'd heard about it as a kid. So I've been to big conventions, but never something like this that's just solely around books. So it's going to be a very, very different and sort of neat experience.
Running into some of your readers, some of your fans there, do you?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully it'll be fans, and hopefully, from the roster of writers, it's going to be, for me, it's going to be a dream. I mean, running into people that, I've read multiple books of theirs and stuff like that. I mean, that's just really slick. I've never had that opportunity, and I'm as much a fan of the genre as anything else. So, the opportunity to rub elbows with those kinds of folks is really, really slick.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, like you said, John Sanford and the other ones, that'd be pretty nice pretty sweet to be to run into them like that.
Yeah. My bar tab will be big after I buy all of them around. So.
Yeah, it'll be worthwhile to pick their brains. Get a little nugget of information right there. So when do you start to work on the third one? I know you're all busy now and you're promoting this one, but do you already have the third one planned out?
Yeah. I've been sort of noodling, where things need to go. When I came up with this concept, way before I ever had a publication deal or anything like that, I sort of plotted out, or at least came up with the nuggets of several books for Walker. And so now it's a matter of sort of going back to those and flushing them out to sort of a fully fleshed out idea. But yeah, no, I'm definitely thinking about, what comes next, and hopefully people like Takeoff enough and like False Horizon enough that there'll be the opportunity to do more books in the series. And
do you still, I mean, with your schedule and and working as a lawyer and everything, do you still find time to read for fun?
Hey, that's a really good question. I try. I do a lot of reading for work. And so I also really try to avoid reading when I'm writing, if that makes sense. So now that I'm just about finished with a project, I actually have a stack of books that I'd love to plow through. But I try and confine that to when I'm not really working on my own stuff, because I don't want the streams to sort of cross.
All right. Well, then, and what are you mentioned you're on Facebook and all that. What's your? And I'll have links on the website for the podcast. But for the listeners, what's your website and your Facebook? Where can they find you?
Sure. My author website is josephreidbooks.com, and my last name's Reid. And then at Twitter and Instagram, I'm the same thing. I'm at Joseph Reid Books. And then Facebook, I had to tweak it just a little bit. I'm at Joseph Reid Books 1. So, but you can find me in any of those places.
And then, for the listeners, if you go to Amazon and just do a search for Takeoff, you'll see it there. I was reading the preview, and it's I love how you start things off right away with the blood on the like the first sentence is action basically.
Oh yeah, thank you. That was very much a calculated move to start with a bang, literally. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. As the blood struck my right cheek. So so people, you guys recommend to go check out his book. And okay, so won't keep you here any longer, Joe. I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast, and again, congrats on your success.
Oh, thank you for making time for me, Alan. I really appreciate it.
All right, and then I don't know if you have anything else you want to say to your readers, or any advice for any aspiring writers that are listening out there.
Oh, geez. I mean, if anything, I am a testament to, if it's something you want, you sort of have to persevere. You have to, keep doing it. And you don't let the rejections in the slush pile get you down. But by the same token, I mean, the thing I'd say to everybody is, having gone through all that rejection and having struggled at this for a long time, I'm just supremely thankful for the way things have turned out. I mean, it took a long time and it was a lot of hard work, but, everybody from my agent to my editor to my publisher, and then everybody just buying the book and reacting to it. I mean, that's why we do these things is to entertain people and to get a reaction out of them and hopefully give them some hours of enjoyment. And, I'm thrilled that people are getting that. And I hope a lot more people will try it.
All right. Great. Thank you so much, Joe. Love that advice. Just keeping at it. don't get down.
Exactly. That's you have to keep doing that because there's a lot of rejection in this process.
Yeah. All right, Joe. Thanks a lot for being on the show. Appreciate it, and I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Alan. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Meet the Thriller Author. I'd like to ask you to please review and rate this podcast over on iTunes. It really helps me get the word out. If you take a few seconds of your time to do that, it would be much appreciated. You can also visit my website at thrillingreads.com/podcast for show notes on this episode, as well as information about the podcast in general. And you can also sign up for my mailing list there. You'll be getting special offers from our guests, as well as information, behind the scenes information on the podcast. And please do visit my author website at alanpeterson.com. I appreciate your support. And so until next episode, I will talk to you then.